Nigeria's CEO, the President, Muhammadu Buhari, at a budget presentation to the joint session of the National Assembly on Tuesday. So this budget seeks to stimulate the economy, according to the President, and focusing on infrastructure, inclusive growth, and youth unemployment, among many other things. Tilewa Adebajo, CEO at the CFG Advisory and Economic Policy Analyst, joins me now as we take a look at some of the macro issues that were actually raised. Good morning to you, Tilewa, and thank you so much for coming on the program.
Good morning, Harriet. And first of all, let me congratulate Channels Television on this award.
Thank you.
It's well deserved, and we hope you add more grease to your elbows.
We have already started, and so we're thinking about clinching up onto 20. You know, Channels Television will be celebrating its 20th anniversary next year, and so yes, we've got more laurels coming for us.
Nice.
So back to the issue at hand. Listening to that, part of the speech from yesterday, immediate thoughts for you?
Well, I think first of all, I think the budget is out. At least they got it out before the end of the year. And so it's now for us to do the analysis of the budget. I think it's early days yet. I think this is not a budget that we need to rush to pass because there's still a lot of issues around the fundamentals of the budget, i.e. the underlying pricing of oil. If you take a look at the oil futures, you're looking at oil at about 34, 35. And we're pricing at about 38. So we might need to take a look at that and reprice benchmark price at maybe $30 a barrel to be very conservative. We also need to be conscious of the fact that our debt profile will move up from 12 trillion to 16 trillion within the next 1 year. So from 12 trillion naira to 16 trillion naira. We had a 2 trillion naira deficit this year, and we're financing another 2.2 trillion deficit next year. So that would take the debt profile from $60 billion to $80 billion. But what is more concerning, Harriet, with this budget is that we have reached the limit of our debt ceiling. We're now using 35% of our revenues to service debt, and that is way above the 28% recommended by the Debt Management Office. So we've hit our debt ceilings. So after next year, it will be very difficult for us to borrow more, except to reduce our cost of borrowing.
But then, the President has said that even if there's going to be any borrowings, it's going to majorly be to fund capital projects.
Fantastic. Yes, no problem about that. And we're hoping that that can yield investments or returns that will have a positive impact on the economy. 980 billion in domestic borrowing and about 900 billion in external borrowings. That's fine. If you're putting that into infrastructure, you're looking at about 2.2 billion for 2.2 billion US dollars for power, housing, and infrastructure. To build a 600 megawatt power plant, you're looking at spending about $700 million already out of the 2.2 billion. So if you had to use all that money to build power plants, maybe you get 4. You also have to build roads, you need to provide housing. So it's not a lot of money. While it's a positive step in a good direction, we also need to be able to put the policy framework around this budget. And the government also needs to articulate very clearly its concessioning strategy and its privatization strategy to be able to fund the infrastructure deficit. And if you can put the right structures in place, then you can attract private sector investments into financing your infrastructure deficit through concessioning and privatization.
So talking about concessioning and privatization, you're talking about the Bureau of Public Enterprise?
Yes.
You're talking about the BPP. What roles can they play to ensure that this plan is actually, realized?
Well, that is squarely in the Vice President's purvey. So, but what the government needs to do is to get the BPE. They know what they're doing. They're very good. And the person leading the BPE now is a seasoned professional. They can put out the right concessioning plans and the right privatization plans to say, if government is going to fix, we have $2 billion this year for capital expenditure. But the projects we have on ground are probably close to $8 billion. So you need to concession some of these projects, or you need to privatize some of these projects in order to be able to raise the revenue and let the private sector finance that deficit. So they need to create the enabling environment and put out the concessioning programs and the privatization programs that will help the government meet the deficit financing. So that's very critical also. Another thing from the budget is that while government has consolidated government in terms of, you saw that recurrent expenditure, government is yet to downsize. So there's a need to look at their plans, which is looking about reducing that over the in the medium term by about 10%. There needs to be more aggression in that area of cost control. And let's hope that the efficiency unit that's been set up would look into this.
Let's talk a little bit about this capital allocations let's look at the non-debt recurrent allocation now. Education is getting about over 1 billion naira per day spending. How interesting does this seem to you, especially since a lot of people feel that at this time it should be defense that should be getting the largest chunk? Well,
as you've mentioned, that's recurrent. So there's still more universities, more primary schools, more secondary schools and polytechnics. There's still more teachers than policemen and soldiers. So definitely they'll get more of that budget because it's on the recurrent side. We need to fund the schools that are existing right now.
Then we'll also need to make sure that the security situation is properly put in check, especially in the northeast. And the president is really very passionate about it. And the military in the last couple of months, ever since this new administration started, has really ramped up its fight to ensure that the northeast is secured from the insurgents there.
Yes, that is why you see the defense spending on the capital expenditure. You see on the capital side of the expenditure, defense is number 3. In terms of what it's getting at. So most of the increase you see for the defense is on the capital expenditure, not on the recurrent, because we're maintaining the size of the military and the armed forces and the security forces we have right now. So that recurrent expenditure is not, there's not a significant increase in that on the recurrent side. You'll find that increase on the capital expenditure to buy more arms and to buy more equipment for the Army and the Air Force and the Navy to be able to engage in their operations in the northeast and also the rest of Nigeria to secure our borders.
Now, the president says there's going to be a reduction in taxes for smaller businesses. There's no specific amount, what it's going to be. And then the FRSC has a mandate to quickly begin to implement this. But in light of what the president has said and in light of the challenges we see in the economy, both domestic and on a global scale, how feasible do you think this is going to be? And what should the FRS be thinking of taxing small businesses?
Well, small businesses traditionally have not been part of the tax dragnet. They've been very difficult to manage. And I don't know what significant income will come from the SMEs because most of them are in the informal sector. But for those who are part of that formal sector, a tax break is always welcome. And I think it's an incentive to be able to encourage these businesses to move. So it's a step in the right direction. But I think, again, it shows you some of the things that still needs to be put as part of this budget. And I think that we need to come back and revisit this budget in another 2 to 3 weeks because the framework, the policy framework that will drive this budget